myself and don't always allow myself to feel some of the things that you all feel or that we should feel at this time. But being here today has really made me reflect on some of my work and feel in ways that I haven't felt during this first year of my PhD research. I've prepared some remarks as Karine and Forges, Esperance and Christina have asked me to prepare on the individual and collective psychology of genocide denial, and I wanted to share those with you today. April 7th marks the 21st commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. As my Rwandan friends have said, this week the rains have come and the preparations have been made. I sat at home in Boston and I pictured where I was at this time last year in Rwanda. Sakumi Najiri Zigitondo, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was already exhausted. The day would be long. I awakened to an eerie and mournful silence. I missed the bustle of the morning commute, the gardeners and the motorbikes, that I soon learned to recognize as signs and comforting sounds of normalcy in the city. Kwibuka, to remember. Ndibuka, I remember. Collective silence will allow the atrocities to be repeated somewhere else was a theme that carried throughout a recent conference I participated in. Halfway through the conference, I realized it was April 2nd, and one thing began to dominate the space in my mind. What would I say on April 7th when so many of my Rwandan friends would be mourning the 21st anniversary of the murder of their beloved friends and family? I started making a list of friends I would call and send my condolences for their loss and the support for their community. I would be prepared just to listen to whatever they wanted to speak about. From memories of a happy childhood to horrific stories of death and destruction, and thoughts of how difficult life was to live in the rainy month of April in Kigali. I would listen intently to my friends and not talk much, as I felt it was my place to simply support them as they detailed their history with genocide, hoping I could provide some support. Yet today I was asked to play a different role for the survivor community here in Boston, to speak about genocide denial and its impact on Rwandan genocide survivors. I do not want to speak about the political aspects of denial, although one survivor reminded me that it's nearly impossible to escape politics when discussing this subject. Rather, I wanted to discuss the lived experience of survivors who have been dealing with genocide denial as an affront to the truth that took away their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, and children. I encourage you to accompany me into the psychological aspects of genocide denial and to try and understand what our survivor friends are experiencing today. Genocide denial is not a new phenomenon. This year we observe the 100th commemoration of the Armenian genocide, despite individuals who continue to deny, despite the oral history testimonies, the archival material, and the physical evidence that prove its occurrence. Greece recently banned Holocaust denial to combat the Global Dawn, a neo-Nazi party that has gained influence in Greece. As one Rwandan survivor reminded me, genocide denial occurs after every genocide and is something that can be expected in its aftermath. Speaking with my Kinyarwanda professor this week, he mentioned the story of Theodore Sinikuwabo, the interim president of Rwanda in 1994. He came to Butare during the genocide, a major city in the southern province of Rwanda, to motivate citizens to kill. Murakorikia bandi batanga akazi, he would say. The people elsewhere have already started the work. Nimikoro hasi, start the job. He used the imperative form of the verb to appeal to the masses as a command, as an order. Please do it like the other people, he would say. It is this early language of the genocide that is well documented in the minds of genocide survivors as well as in human rights archives that serve as an aspect to combat genocide denial. After speaking with another survivor, she said that Rwandans didn't have to describe the genocide in its direct aftermath. They never had to refer to it among themselves, and it was other people who coded and termed it. The French word genocide was exported from the French system and imported into Rwanda. Words like kutsemba-tsemba, to massacre or exterminate, again and again were used by the perpetrators. They were used in a song that was sung by perpetrators before and during the genocide. The double nature of the root of the word tsemba emphasized on the action of not leaving anyone behind. Tuzabatsemba-tsemba, itsemba-boko. These refer to the extermination of an ethnic group, and this is how perpetrators imagined what they were doing. As a researcher who focuses on testimonies, I can see the progression of language and the memories embedded in the minds of survivors about perpetrators, and it connects survivors from any city, any region, or any village in Rwanda. For survivors, genocide denial is a continuation of deliberate acts by perpetrators to prolong survivors' suffering and to subject them to perpetual mental and emotional torture. It is an attempt not only to deny the murder of their families, but also to assassinate the memory of those they murdered, thus completing the full cycle of extermination. Deniers manipulate the facts of genocide, minimize death tolls, and recount issues of civil war rather than planned genocide. Psychologically, deniers seek to reaffirm their position in society by denying both their involvement and the consequences of their actions. It is therefore up to survivors to use witness testimony to fight the cycle of impunity and to condemn rather than reaffirm these perpetrators. There are systems in place that enable denial, including partnerships with the media. Stories of perpetrators and contested narratives are stories that will get people talking. And for the media, the controversy or the suffering these articles will inflict on survivors don't seem to play into consideration when they decide what to print. In an American court system, we often see relationships formed between defendants and perpetrators, and this happens psychologically without the defenders realizing it. They're sitting in front of them in the courtroom and listening to their story and thinking to themselves, this was a situation, a war, an invasion, but never a genocide. In the Munyenyezi case, this was likely a tactic to gain favor for her, but it happens more often than in the courtroom. Those who are unfamiliar with the facts of genocide, with the international legal rulings, and with the legal and sociological definitions of genocide, and with the harms of denial, often ask themselves, why genocide, and why not civil war or two-sided violence? However, we can see how those who work to defend perpetrators may end up mixing up their story with the history, unaware of how it feels to survivors when they read their arguments and stories heard from people who committed the genocide. In a recent foreign policy article, which just came out 2 days ago, the National Security Archive in the United States released its records about the US and genocide in Rwanda in 1994. The early cables from the Clinton administration confirmed that US intelligence in '94 informed President Clinton that what was taking place on the ground was genocide, yet cautioned Clinton against using the term because of international and national intervention it would require. Rwanda became another case of violence among those people over there, and their suffering had nothing to do with us. For those who were perpetrators who actually participated in the complicated system of violence during the genocide, they know that survivors often don't have the means to engage with them. Power relations make it easy for denialists to speak out, knowing that survivors won't be able to respond to every affront. The perpetrators often lead comfortable lives today in European and American cities across the world, though not all. With their power lost and clear social and political difficulties in re-entering society, many perpetrators can't face what has been lost and the effects of these losses. During one of my interviews in Rwanda, I encountered a woman who refused to acknowledge her crimes despite documentation. She was a poor woman living in a small village in the southern province, and her story showed that she initially feared for her life and her own safety when Hutu extremist perpetrators entered her village in 1994. Somehow, she turned to help the killers round up and identify Tutsi, a role that many women played during the genocide. Despite the fact that she admitted her participation in these roundups of Tutsi, she did not believe that she was a perpetrator because, as she said, she didn't kill anyone. This shows the complexity of the psychological aspect of deniers, that even someone who participated and was responsible for the death of many Rwandans, she is still not ready to face that her actions led to such negative consequences. This is one of the psychological bases that leads to denial, the inability to come to terms with personal actions and consequences, and the personal denial that lives within these perpetrators, often for life. Perpetrators still outnumber survivors in Rwanda and globally, and their actions of denial affect survivors in ways that are both expected and unexpected. As survivor communities are often smaller in number and are also still struggling with the effects of the violence they faced during the genocide, they are constantly evaluating where to concentrate their energy. According to one survivor, we are small in number, exhausted, and don't have the means to combat and respond to deniers. Denial encompasses misinformation and conviction, which is not about the facts of the matter, but about the anger that they didn't succeed, that they lost their power, and that they felt they were entitled to. They lost their privileged place in society. They see themselves on the road to regaining power, and they have a fear of direct testimony, which can be a further threat to their power. For many years, genocide survivors have closely watched the denial trend in disbelief, often unsure about how to respond. Fortunately, the days of laissez-faire and silence are over. Community building programs have been implemented in New York and in Boston. The most recent program, which we will see a film about in a minute, the Survivors' Voice program, which was organized by the Genocide Survivors Support Network, brought together 40 Rwandan survivors to Harvard Law School in February 2015 to learn how to fight and use their voices for education and advocacy. They created a deliberate community and safe space to bear witness and develop their testimonies to educate others. Now that 21 years have passed since 1994, some survivors feel that they are in a stronger position emotionally to reclaim their stories and use them to help education. The facts are often messy, and the roles that people played are not always straightforward. This is why each individual story matters and adds to the collectivization of knowledge created by programs like the Survivors' Voice program. It is now the week after, April 7th, 2015, and the 21st commemoration of the 1994 genocide. This commemoration has provided the opportunity for survivors to meet again and to collectively honor and mourn their lost loved ones. One survivor urged, "We must get together in happy times, too. While commemoration is significant in our lives, part of rebuilding is to enjoy our community more than once a year. While there are very few survivors left, the broader community and friends of survivors have come out to share in their mourning, even when survivors might be a minority at these events. As one friend of survivors said, it is a human story, and we are all a part of it if you choose to be open." Thank you very much. Mwakoze cyane.